morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Boy, these late summer, early fall rides are pretty close to cowboy heaven. There is nothing as peaceful as saddling up at daylight, packing a saddlebag, lunch, and a thermos of coffee, and following cow tracks on the range. All those great cowboy songs just seem to roll through my mind when I'm doing that, and I think, boy, how blessed we are to live this way. And anyway, this week Baxter Black shares an experience that made an incredible impression on him.
I have been on Johnny Carson, the cover of USA Today, and fed the snakes at the Dixie Chicken.
And the Rangeland News looks at the markets again.
Says we have a chance of having this year's average prices come in below last year for...
For what, Gary? Well, I guess we'll find out. And in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight, I have one that I think you'll really enjoy.
His cow pony let out a nicker. He smiled at the voice of his friend. He thinks of the miles they have covered, and today they'll ride out again.
And this has been quite a ride. Today it'll be the fourth installment of an after-supper real-life history lesson about how it was not long ago with longtime rancher Bill Palmer.
You might turn a cow too sharp, and she'd take after you, and your horse she wasn't going to be able to get away from her. You shot the cow, because she'd kill you. Or kill your horse, yeah.
On the Urban Saddles and Western Wear horse training file, a rider has an older horse that she's afraid to ride away from the barn because he just throws a fit. And we'll find out what she might be able to do. And I guess this fits pretty well to start things off. It's Justin and the Montana.
To tell me tales of the times when he was young, but riding across his daddy's ranch from dawn to setting sun. He could ride for miles and miles, no fences blocking the way. He said, you should have been here, son, back in the good old days. You should have been here back in the good old days. The summer winds would blow our cares away. Free and easy most all the time, that's what he would say. You know it don't seem so long ago, back in the good old days. Asphalt road, a thought keeps crossing my mind. I wonder how this valley used to look back in Grandpa's time. The 6-lane highway was just a trail, no road signs leading the way. I wished I could have been here then, back in the good old days. You should have been here back in the good old days. The summer winds would blow our cares away. Free and easy most all the time, that's what he would say. You know it don't seem so long ago, back in the good old days. I thought about my grandpa's words as my mind drifted away, and I could almost see him here back in the good old days. You should have been here back in the good old days. The summer winds would blow our cares away. Free and easy most all the time, that's what he would say. You know it don't seem so long ago, back in the good old days. You know it don't seem so long ago, back in the good old days.
Well, I am so incredibly thankful for the great old Cowboys it's been my privilege to ride with over the years, and we've sure had some adventures and some unforgettable times. Bill Palmer is definitely one of them, and his days in the saddle covered an awful lot of miles. I watched him and his brother Jim and his son Doug do some incredible things with a rope, a horse, and a cow in some of the toughest country you could ever find. And, they've always had the end of their rope anchored to the horn.
All your years of being tied hard and fast, did you ever have to cut your rope? Cut it loose?
Never. I've been told to do it, but I wasn't going to cut the rope. One time I roped a great big cow of old Paddy Deneuve. He was an Indian fellow on the reserve. And he had a good little cow herd there. And this poor old girl had a can on her foot. And she was a big old horn cow, and I roped her, and she got a little mad at me. And Jim was there, and he didn't want to heal her. He says, cut her loose. I said, you heal that cow, we'll get that can off her foot. And he did, finally. Yeah.
Wasn't there a time when you had a real epidemic of something that was affecting the calves? The calves were getting sick.
The guy that was in the cow camp then kind of got his walking ticket, tell you the truth. We went in there to move the cattle out of the Bell place. Now, I hadn't had a chance to get away from the ranch to go through the cow herd when in there. And I went in there, and God, I find dead calf under a tree here. Find dead calf under there. Altogether, I counted about 25 dead calves. Freddie Piplo come in. He says, Bill, I've counted 10 dead calves. By this time, we got the whole cow herd gathered. God, we had shipping fever, or coccidiosis among the cattle. So I went down to Heinz's, which was the closest phone, and phoned Lauren Greenaway. He was a vet up. Lauren says, what do you think you got? I said, I think I got coccidiosis. So he looked at the calf. Yeah, he says, yeah. He said, what'd you do? I said, well, I had some sulfa drug here, and I give 2 or 3 of them some of that. Well, he says, that's about the best you can do. And we'd give them about 50 to 100 cc's of it with an intravenous tube in their side. The next day, we let the cattle go. Instead of going out to the summer range, we kept them right in the Bell place. And there was Freddie Piplo, myself, Jim Bedard was with us, that's it, and Jim Cobb. And we set out to roping calves. Well, Cobb was not too good with the rope, so he said, look, I'll do the doctoring, you guys do the roping. So that's okay. So Freddie and Jim and I, we were roping and flanking these big calves in July, you see, and tying them up. We were all packing 5 and 6 piggin strings. We'd tie them up, and Cobb would run over and give them their shot, and then turn them loose, and give us a pig. Next time we come by, we'd get a piggin string from them. Well, we did that from about 10 o'clock in the morning till noon. Then we go in and have lunch at the camp. And I laughed at Jimmy. He says, Jim Bedard, he says, that was fun when it started out, but he says, it's damn well worked now.
Yeah, it can get that way. Well, Jim Bedard, another great old cowboy I was able to ride a few miles with over the years. And there's lots more to come when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Just this week, I was able to find a good-sized bunch of cows and calves Still enjoying the high country grass up on the summer range, and I had very little trouble letting them know that it was time to gather up their calves and head on down to lower country. And I just sat on Cody and whistled a couple of times, made sure I was in the right position, and they lined out down the trail. What a treat when the cows handle like that, as long as you're on a horse.
Were the cattle a lot wilder back in those earlier days that you remember, Bill, than what we've got to contend with today?
Yes, I'd say yes. Now, when we were riding, when I started out, they were wilder than in later years. And when my dad was riding, they were gentler than when my granddad rode.
Oh, yeah.
Now, my granddad, he said he packed a 6-gun. He said everybody riding packed a 6-gun in those days. They didn't do it to shoot one another.
No.
But you might turn a cow too sharp, and she'd take after you, and your horse wasn't going to be able to get away from her. You shot the cow, because she'd kill you, or kill your horse. Yeah, yeah.
So that old painting by Charlie Russell of the cow with a guy flattened up almost against the bank, and he's reaching for his gun at that time. Maybe you've seen that Charlie Russell
Yes, I
painting.
have, yeah.
That's more truth than fiction. in
That's
that.
right. Yes. Yeah.
So then you come from you would be the third generation at least in this way of life in this part of the country.
Yes. Yes, it would be, because my great grandfather went into the Nicola about 1864. Closest Jim and I can figure it out. They homesteaded at the south end of Stump Lake. There, what is called the Palmer Field.
That's where that name came from.
That's right.
Yeah.
And when my granddad was 17 years old. Now, he was 3 years old when he moved into that area. He came up over the old Hope Princeton Trail in a clothes basket on a pack horse. That's how my grandfather got into the... And his brother rode in front of my great-grandmother on a horse, on the saddle.
Oh,
He was a little older.
yeah.
And now there's the S brand that Wilson's had up in Sullivan Valley, and I think young Gordon Wilson has it up at Littleford.
Great.
That came from down in Washington, that brand. My great-grandfather went down there and bought a whole bunch of cattle. I don't know how many. When he got into BC, he kept the brand because they're far enough away from the other cattle.
Your brand is spur. Is it a spur? It's like a Y or?
It's been called. It's supposed to be an upside-down oarlock.
Oh yeah.
And it was old Sam Armour's brand. He had part of the Seven-O Ranch where the Krells are. I can show you where his cabin was. There's a foundation there, and that was his brand. And my granddad kept it as a horse brand.
Well, back in the days when this part of the West was really wild, it was in the 1870s that the McLean brothers, then just in their teens and early 20s, terrorized the pioneers in the Kamloops area. The two McLean brothers and Alex Hare, stealing horses and weapons and generally living as wild bandits, and they had no respect, it seems, for anybody that got in their way. They had stolen a valuable stud horse from a rancher in the Nicola Valley by the name of Palmer. The posse was formed, and when the dust cleared, a constable, Johnny Usher, had been shot. And later the McLean boys and Alex Hare were hanged in New Westminster. And this song, written by Ian Tyson, sung by the Sheep River Rounders, tells some of that story.
And that wild Alex Hare, they were armed, all were armed. It was them, I'd have known them anywhere. Willie Palmer's stallion was no $20 cayuse, and when the wild one stole him, he hightailed it into town. Usher in those days was keeping order in the district. Before he'd ridden 30 miles, McLean boy shot him down. Oh, McLean boys and that wild Alex Hare. A shepherd known as Kelly saw the wild ones as they passed. They shot him with the rifle and they took his watch and chain. And when the posse found them, they were in a lonely cabin. Thirst and hunger took their fight away and no one else was slain. 4 rode by, rode through here, 3 McLean boys and that wild Alex Hare. January 1881, the first time in that province that they'd strung up brothers 3. The son killed 19 Germans, crossed the seas back in 17. One thing that's for damn sure, they're a wild old family. 4 rode by, rode through here, 3 McLean boys and that wild Alex Hare.
Legendary episode of the Wild McLean Gang that there have been books written about and movies written about and everything else kind of centers around a stallion, I believe, that was it your grandfather had
my
tethered?
Great-grandfather.
Your great-grandfather.
My great-grandfather's horse, yeah.
And that's the horse that was stolen.
That's
and then Johnny Usher and the Mounties went after the McLean boys. And
no, it wasn't the Mounties.
Oh.
BC Police.
Okay, now there's another place where the legend has been probably clouded a little bit.
In the books, they tell you BC Police.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that right?
See, the BC, I had British Columbia, put it that way. I've got a book here reading about it, about the police, and the British Columbia police were before the Mounties. In BC, they had BC Police.
Did your dad or your granddad tell you much about that episode, or did you hear their version?
My dad a little bit, but my granddad never said much about it. He'd be fairly young too when that happened, I guess, from what I gather. Now, when he was 17, my granddad was riding at Douglas Lake, second in command of the cattle. They had 18,000 head in those days. And old Joe Payne was the cow boss. And he told Graves, he says, we've got to cut back, because nobody put hay up in those days. We've got to cut back. Graves said, no, we're going to get bigger. And Joe Payne said, the Northern Butcher is going to get us. I think it was 3 years later it did, or 4 years later, because my granddad by that time had gone back home to the Palmer field, like with his mother, and he asked Joe Payne, because there was dead cattle everywhere. You could smell them in the spring. Coyotes were fat and slick. Yeah. And he asked Joe Payne how many cattle they lost, and he did not know. But he said, last year, I think it was they branded 10,000 calves, and this year we haven't branded 3. Something like that. I can't remember the figures offhand. And but as my granddad said, a lot of those cows would calve, and they'd just walk away, leave the calf, because they were thin, you know, and didn't worry about the calf. But in 1903, my granddad was on, I think it was 1903, my granddad was on Stump Lake. He owned Stump Lake then. And that was a bad winter.
More about how the cattle industry was devastated from that winter coming up in just a little while. And next, Baxter Black will get a bit carried away. Then it's the Rangeland News telling you what's coming up and what's already happened, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, and I'll be right back after that with a little peek at the Cajun dance.
Your land is a legacy, a challenge from those who tended it before you to build on their foundations. At Corteva Agriscience, we understand what it means to be the stewards of a legacy. We embrace the challenge of building on the foundation of Dow AgroSciences to maintain your trust, to bring new solutions, to help you care for your land. See how we can help build your legacy at rangeandpasture.com.
And for our Canadian listeners, just check corteva.ca, the Canadian website.
I made a trip to South Louisiana. I went to the horse races at Rangeland Downs, at Tabasco Plantation, Fred's Bar, and Big Mamu. But the highlight of the trip was a dance down at Bro Bridge. Let me put it to you this way. These girls can dance. He was right. I was flat in the middle of a magic place. Whiskey River Landing on the levee of the Chafalaya Swamp in South Louisiana. The floor was given underneath the dancers. The Hooval family band was driving Cajun music into every crevice and cranny, every pore and fiber, every pop, tinkle, and nail hole, till the room itself seemed to expand under the pressure. The slippers glided, stomped, kicked, and clacked. They stood on their toes, rocked on their heels. They moved like water skippers on the top of a chocolate swamp. Pausing, sliding, setting, pirouetting, leaping from a starting block, breaking to a smooth stop, heaving to, boat-like against a floating pier, and then off again into the blur of circling bare legs, boot tops and bone temps, all in perfect rhythm to the beating of the bayou heart. I have lived a fairly long time. I have been places. I have seen bears mate, boats sink, and Gila monsters scurry. I have danced till I couldn't stand up and stood up till I couldn't dance. I've eaten bugs, broccoli, and things that crawl on the sea floor. I have seen as far back as Mayan temples, as far away as Betelgeuse, and as deep down as Tom Robbins. I have been on Johnny Carson, the cover of USA Today, and fed the snakes at the Dixie Chicken. I have held things in my hand that will be here a million years beyond my own existence, and yet, on that dance floor, I felt a ripple in the universe, a time-warp moment when the often unspectacular human race threw its head back and howled at the moon. Thank you, Napoleon. Thank you, Canadians, and thank you, Shirley Cormier and all-girl Cajun band. It was a crawfish crab meat carousel, a seafood Bodine Creole bell, an Acadian accordion, heavy water gumbo etouffee, Spanish moss jambalaya, and a Tabasco popsicle where you suck the head and eat the tail. My gosh, you can say it again. These girls can dance. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by Corteva Agri-Science.
Well, for a long time now, Ranger Doug, Woody Paul, Too Slim, and Joey the Cowboy King have been entertaining folks with their incredible live shows. They're great musicians and genuinely funny guys, but I really appreciate what they do, and as Ranger Doug says, we have a lot of fun with Western music, but never want to make fun of Western music. For over 30 years, and the personnel have not changed. Still the same four guys, and they must have had our friend Kent Rollins, the Chuck Wagon Cook, in mind when they did this one, as Too Slim's alter ego, the Wagon Cook Side Meat, takes center stage.
Now I cooked in every cow camp, from here to Kathmandu. I filled the plates of kings and queens and hungry buckaroos. Boom! I've sliced it, I've diced it, I've turned it on a spit. Boom! I roasted and toasted and boiled and poached and tenderized a bit. Boom! But do I use a recipe to fulfill my gourmet plan? No, 'cause I have cooked near everything that's found in this here land. I've cooked everything, man. I've cooked everything, man. I made them cowpokes sing, man. I made that dinner bell ring, man. I got plenty more hash to sling, man. Yeah, I've cooked everything. Boom! Pork chop, veal chop, chop steak, abalone, pizza, pasta, portobello, fried bologna, green beans, pole beans, lima beans, ratatouille, walleye, fried pie, coleslaw, crab bluey, mashed potatoes, green tomatoes, okra, sour belly, macaroni, rigatoni, goulash, whoa, Nelly. I've cooked everything, man. I've cooked everything, man. I made them cowpokes sing, man. I made that dinner bell ring, man. I got plenty more hash to sling, man. Yeah, I've cooked everything. Oh. Ham, spam, jam, chocolate mousse, berries, cherries, sausage, gravy, stuffed goose, roast beef, lettuce leaf, big BLTs, tacos, enchiladas, nachos, extra cheese, Finlands, chitlins, baked Alaska flambe, hot nut, sheep gut, Cincinnati three-way. I've cooked everything, man. I've cooked everything, man. I need some oxygen, man. Oh, everything, man. I've plenty more hash to sling, man. Well, I've cooked everything. Oh, one more. Ooh. Cupcakes, crab cakes, milkshakes, Parmesan, fruit, fun plate, lunch meat. If you want a sushi, fried rice, sweet and sour by the hour, coffee, toffee, iced tea, chocolate tower, pig's feet, mincemeat, banana pudding, so sweet. Come on, boys, grab a fork and let's eat.
He's cooked everything, man. He's cooked everything, man.
I made them cowpokes sing, man. I made that dinner bell ring, man.
Is there any one thing that you never have cooked?
Nope, I've cooked everything. Come on, boys, let's eat.
Now the news of the Rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
At the top of page 1, it says a lot of good stuff is coming out of our little vegetable garden here at the ranch this fall. Tastes so good when it's fresh like that. And after going to the supermarket, I think we should have made it a way bigger. So where are food prices headed? Let's check in with Gary Crawford.
USDA is out this week with a revised forecast for food prices at the grocery store, but they actually didn't change the overall forecast from last month.
We're expecting food-at-home prices to increase in a range between 0.5% and 1.5%.
Gianna Short is a food price economist with the Agriculture Department. We talked with her while she was on a visit to a dairy farm in Georgia, so I had to ask what the forecast is for retail dairy prices.
We're expecting dairy products to increase between 1% and 2%.
Meanwhile, Gianna Short says we have a chance of having this year's average prices come in below last year for pork, fats and oils, fresh fruit, and eggs. Those prices, egg prices down another 3.7% last month.
And we've revised that forecast down again. We're expecting eggs to go down between 8 and 9%.
Meanwhile, she loves to stick her neck out. She's already making her first food price forecast for 2020.
0.5% to 1.5%.
Of course, being so early in the game, subject to change with notice. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Beyond Meat reported its second quarter earnings last month, and traders called the news mixed. Wall Street analysts expected a loss of 8% per share, but the company reported a loss of 24 cents per share. Second quarter revenue, however, was better than expected, $67.3 million versus the analysts' expectations of $52.7 million. Shares of the company ticked up 1% in extended trading. Now back to real meat. On average, beef byproduct values represent about 10% of fed cattle prices. And byproduct values have been eroding sharply in the last 18 months, with weekly values declining about $10.70 per hundredweight in the early 2018 period to about $9 per hundredweight by the end of the year. And byproducts represented 8.2% of fed cattle prices in 2018 at an average value of $9.60 per hundredweight on live weight basis. But it's down now to $8.88 for the last week we have the numbers. And beef byproduct values, especially hide values, are often considered a bit of a bellwether of global economic conditions. As such, some analysts are saying that byproduct values bear watching in the coming months. In the meantime, current U.S. beef byproduct values are reducing fed cattle values by over $110 a head compared to peak byproduct values just 5 years ago. So I guess if the hide prices are going down, that's not bad news for everybody, especially if you happen to be a saddle maker. Nevada's wild horse population has exploded to an all-time high of more than 43,000 wild horses. That's 60% of all the wild horses roaming the American West, and it's nearly quadruple the 12,800 that the Bureau of Land Management says Nevada's land can sustain. And there's long been controversy over just how to manage wild horses in the West, and some would say the result has been no management at all. Well, this old cowboy and that sweet-sounding river song guitar will be at the 2019 Winter Fair, Provincial Winter Fair at Circle Creek Ranch, just outside of Kamloops, British Columbia, Saturday, September the 28th. I'll be sharing songs and stories from about 3 until 5 in the afternoon, and I think I'll be on about the same time as the pig and duck race. And you might remember seeing Circle Creek Ranch in that first episode of The Amazing Race Canada. I think that was back in July. September the 17th, there's a regular cattle sale and special yearling sale at the BC Livestock Co-op yards in Kamloops. September the 19th, the regular cattle sale at the Williams Lake Yards, and September 20th, regular sale at the Vanderhoof Yards. And you can get all the information and watch the sales live at bclivestock.bc.ca. Meanwhile, at the Innisfail Auction Market, regular cattle sales every Wednesday and lots of horse sales too. Be a good idea to list your cattle coming off pastures or range for the fall run. Give Danny, Mark, or Dwayne a call, 1-800-710-3166. Okay, now down to the final item here. And I'm sure a lot of my musician friends can identify with this one. I heard it from the great Western singer Tom Cole, actually. He said, "It's been an interesting day. First, I found a hat full of money laying on the sidewalk. And now I'm being chased by a real angry man carrying a guitar." And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up in the Urban Saddles and Western Wear horse training file, suddenly he sort of jumped to the side. I tried getting him to settle, at which point he went on bucking and jumping around and maybe rearing a little. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground and he yanked the reins out of my hands, and the rest is history. Well, that's what happened with a lady and the 21-year-old horse she leases with another person. What can she do about it? Well, that's next when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. This week on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear horse training file, we hear from a lady who leases a horse along with another lady. They keep him at a boarding place, and the horse is 21 years old and is really giving her problems. That's coming right up, but first, well, so many of you have been asking about the 2020 Spirit of the West cruise, so here's the information. The dates: July the 1st to the 11th, 2020. The ship, Holland America's brand new Koningsdam. The port where we'll board, Vancouver, British Columbia. And our destination,
way up north to Alaska, way up north to Alaska.
A lot of you can drive to Vancouver, or you can take the famous Rocky Mountaineer rail trip, or just a shorter flight. We call this the Spirit of the West and Friends Bringing It Home. Billy and I will be stepping back from hosting cruises after 19 years of doing it, and we want this one to be really special for everybody. Get all the details at 1-800-530-0131 and see our cruise page at hugh-mclennan.com and our cruise Facebook page.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
The way I see it, you'll find a silver lining in just about everything. So as Summer says, adios amigos, it's just another great reason to get over to Irvine Tack and Western Wear. Boots, jeans, shirts, gloves, hoodies, jackets, exciting fall arrivals to keep you toasty when the temperature dips and drops. Irvine's has something for everyone, from cowboys and cowgirls to city folks too. It's Western Wear with a welcome twist. Off Highway 305 on Highway 2 by Crossfield, open 7 days a week.
Canada's largest Western store.
And of course, you can shop online from wherever you are at urbansaddles.ca. Well, a lady has a lease horse that's about 21 years old. He's kept in a box stall, and she rides him out on the trails about 3 days a week for an hour at a time. And here's what she says. We were out for about 40 minutes doing canter, trot, and walk. He was okay, not perfect, a little spooky. Then we turned around. I always turn around at different places. He tried trotting. I wouldn't let him because I could tell he was in some hurry to go home. He usually is, but he'll settle in after a while. I turned him a couple of circles and we went on a hurried walk. Suddenly he just sort of jumped to the side. I tried getting him to settle, at which point he went on to bucking, jumping around, and maybe rearing a little. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground. He yanked the reins out of my hands, and the rest is history. Today I went to at least walk him on the trail, and I was a little bruised from my fall, and I cracked my helmet when I fell, and he really acted goofy. On the way back, he got even worse. So I actually got off, and I led him home. What do I do? Well, you know, this might not be the best horse for you, but here's a few things to keep in mind. For some riders who aren't really comfortable riding at a lope or a gallop, but want to be, as you're cantering along, preferably in an arena or some controlled place, look for a spot ahead, no more than 50 yards ahead of you, and plan to have your horse at a complete stop when you reach that point. If you can't stop him in that distance at a lope, go back to a trot or a walk. And if he still runs past the stop spot, make sure you can disengage him with a one-rein stop. Now, this isn't a total cure, and it can have some unintended consequences, like your horse losing his balance and falling. But here's how I've done it when I really have to get that critter stopped before we hit the wall or go through the fence. Works best with a snaffle, one rein in each hand. Take, say, the left rein and move my hand down to the side of his neck to turn his head slightly to the left, and then as he bends, bring my hand back towards the saddle horn to disengage his hindquarters, and have his left hind foot cross in front of the right. Now, if you do this properly, you've taken the drive power away from his hindquarters, and he can't run straight ahead. Pulling back on the reins with one or both hands in a runaway can be kind of like pouring gas on the fire. Now, with this 21-year-old horse, there's much more that needs to be taken care of before I'd ever consider him safe for that rider to take on the trail alone. And for Urban Saddles and Western Wear, that's the Horse Training File. Something that keeps our horses feeling good and doing well is a daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration. Find out all about it at hoffmanshorseration.com. Well, the memories of the old cowboys who rode the trails we ride on today are, to me at least, really precious. I just hope we can continue to appreciate what those folks went through. And not only can we learn a lot, but boy, are those stories entertaining. I really appreciate it when young folk show an interest in our past. Now, Bill Palmer's eyes still twinkle when he recalls the amazing number of adventures he's had with horses and cattle and ropes, but he also has a keen sense of history and what went on in this part of the West even before his time.
In 1903, my granddad was on, I think it was 1903, my granddad was on Stump Lake. He owned Stump Lake then. And that was a bad winter. Douglas Lake they moved cattle down to the Hudson Bay Meadows down here by where Weyerhaeuser is and fed them. Now they came through and wanted to stop. My granddad had hay and they wanted to stop overnight. And he said, I can't feed your cattle. I won't have any hay for my own. So he said, well, look, you feed the cattle and then put your cattle, so many, in with ours. And we'll head for Kamloops.
Yeah, Mission Flat.
And they had a lot of 5-year-old steers in that bunch. My granddad, he went with them. And he said, you'd take them steers and you'd just push them into the snow till they got tired and push them aside. Then bring another bunch. And they kept doing that, broke trail through. Now, old Graves was into Kamloops waiting for the cattle. And every day he'd go out with a cutter and a horse and go up to Knutsford. And finally he saw the cattle coming. He knew they were coming through, and he went back to Kamloops. And I guess the town shut up for 2 days. He bought whiskey for everybody for 2 days. And they had a real party.
Yeah.
Now, Doug, my son's got a picture of the cattle down at Mission Flats. It was my granddad's picture. They had 4, I think it was, made. My granddad had one. Douglas Lake had one. I don't know where the Stump Lake Ranch got theirs in later years, and so did Bowman. Now there's one, I think the one from the Stump Lake Ranch is in the museum in town.
The winter of 1903.
Yeah. Now I think it was 1904 hit Alberta real bad.
Yeah.
I think that's the year it hit. Yeah.
Well, Bill, it's been really enjoyable, kind of like I say, riding back on some of these old trails like this. And I want to thank you, first of all, for putting up with a greenhorn from Alberta when I first come out to this country, and some of the capers I pulled when I was trying to learn how to do what a cowboy does. And it was guys like you and Jim and George and a lot of these fellows that sure guided me along the way, and that's the only way us young guys can learn.
Well, thank you very much, Hugh, and I enjoyed doing it.
Well, it was actually the winter of 1906 and 1907 that devastated the cattle industry in Alberta. The winter, it seemed, would never end, and the old-timers have heartbreaking stories of cattle drifting blindly for miles and miles in the blizzards, piling up on fence lines and in coulees to die from starvation or freeze to death. And that winter is clearly illustrated in this song from Fred Doberstein, The Pale Horse.
Rider on a pale horse rode across the plains. The cold winds of October never warmed again. A blizzard struck and the winds did blow. The days were bitter cold. Out there on the prairie it was 35 below. Ranchers cried when cattle died in the gray cold bitter dawn. The hell that followed with that horse just went on and on. 1906 and 7 sure blew the winds of change when death rode on a pale horse and killed the open range. From the Gallatin, Montana hills to the grasslands of Alberta, 600 head of cattle on the trail. Heading north towards the great sand hills, the cowboys turned them west. They crossed the Red Deer River where they thought the grass was best. Trailed the herd ever northward across the short grass plains, searching for a safe place that would be their winter range. On a hay flat near Berry Creek, the cowboys made their stand, pitched a tent just beside the trail. Cut some hay for bulls and horses, but not enough to last, 'cause Chinook winds that winter sure did fail. 1906 and 7 shamed the open range when the grass lay deep in the snow on the short grass plains. Cowboys tried to move the herd before a blizzard came. They trailed toward the hunt ranch near a place called Indiana. A blizzard struck in the afternoon, bitter cold with drifting snow, and 2 cowboys died there in that storm a long, long time ago. Rider on a pale horse rode across the plains. The cold winds of October never warmed again. A blizzard struck and the wind did blow. The days were bitter cold. Out there on the prairie it was 35 below. Ranchers cried when cattle died in the gray cold winter dawn. The hell that followed with that horse just went on and on. 1906 and 7 sure blew the winds of change when death rode on a pale horse and killed the open range. 1906 and 7 sure blew the winds of change when death rode on a pale horse out on the short grass plains.
Oh, I love Fred's songwriting, man. Well, The Sons of the Pioneers are still going strong, and they're celebrating their 85th year of continuous performing, and they had a very successful tour of Alberta and Saskatchewan this spring. And their 85th anniversary CD has just been released. You'll hear a great track from it in the classic Song of the West segment when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Roy Rogers Jr., Dusty, is now the lead singer for the Sons of the Pioneers. And it's amazing that he's in the spot his famous father started back in 1934 along with Bob Nolan and Tim Spencer. And this, of course, is possibly their best-known song of all time in our classic Song of the West segment, recorded first by the Pioneers in 1934, then again in 1937 and 1941, and I think probably the biggest selling version was in maybe 61, and then again in 1999. And this version just finished in 2019 with Dusty, Roy Rogers Jr. singing lead.
All day I faced the barren waste without the taste of water, cool water. Old Ann and I, our throats burn dry and souls that cry for water, cool, clear water. Moving Dan, don't you listen to him Dan, he's a devil not a man, and he spreads the burning sand with water. Dan, can you see that big green tree where the water's running free and it's waiting there for me and you? The nights are cool and I'm a fool, each star's a pool of water. Don't you listen to him, Dan, he's a devil, not a man, and he spreads the burning sand with water. Dan, can you see that big green tree where the water's running free and it's waiting there for me and you? The shadows sway and seem to say, tonight we pray for water. Cool water, and way up there he'll hear our prayer and show us where there's water, cool, clear water.
Well, if you'd like to enjoy the fabulous Sons of the Pioneers live, they're doing a tour of BC starting October 7th in Cranbrook, then October the 8th in Trail, October the 9th in Oliver, October 10th in Penticton, October the 11th in Vernon, and October the 12th in Kelowna. And then October the 13th, they wind it up in Chilliwack at the Chilliwack Cultural Center. Now in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight, here's a real nice one from Terry Nash.
He drove past the church Sunday morning. His neighbors were filing on in. He thought about cattle he's gathering and drove on up to the pen. He can only get help on the weekends, so he's missing the warship once more. It's coming on time for the shipping, and he walked back to the trailer door. His cowpony let out a nicker. He smiled at the voice of his friend. He thinks of the miles they have covered, and today they'll ride out again. While he's making the outside circle, he has plenty time to reflect. It's out here where I'm the most peaceful. And it ain't that I disrespect, but Lord, I'm certain you know me. We've been saddle pals most of my life. When this cow work eases up some, I'm there in your house, me and my wife. But out here, my pew's saddle leather, and you know, this life suits me just fine. And the Lord, those churchgoers worship, well, he's the very same as mine. For while they're congregating in church, though I don't stop in to pray, I know I can always visit you while I'm sitting horseback every day. I cinch my pew upon the broad back of your most wondrous beast, and together we explore your range, with Mother Nature as our priest. I see you and the young mama cow as she stands to nurse her new calf, or the moisture that you bring the range, providing feed for her behalf. I see you out on the horizon, and you're among the quaking aspen, and I feel a kinship with you. And Lord, I figured just perhaps for you and me, well, that's sure enough. And I know we'll get by just fine. For the Lord, those good neighbors worship, well, he's the very same as mine.
Thank you so much for making the ride this week, and we'll be back next week right here at the same time, and I sure hope you can too. And as always, thanks to our official Spirit of the West support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. And if you're looking for tractor parts, any make, any year, see Mark's page, bctractorparts.com. And to subscribe to Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine, just go to cowboycountrymagazine.com. And you can see this program and many of our past ones on YouTube with video, and you can download it as a podcast. Get all the links at our website, hugh-mclennan.com. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.